Messiah with Pondering Politics on behalf of Progressive Victory, and I am here with Anderson Clayton, not Anderson Cooper, Anderson Clayton, the chair of the North Carolina Democratic Party, the by far the oldest chairperson of a political party in the, oh, I'm sorry, I had that backwards, by far the youngest. Congratulations, star power.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, let's talk about that because you've got, I think it's fair to say the stakes are high. So North Carolina, I think in many ways, we could say it's a de facto battleground state. If you look at the polling, you have at least as many registered Democrats as Republicans. You know, we've got a really good incumbent governor who is unfortunately term locked. He's out. So it's between Josh Stein, Attorney General, the Democrat, and Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson. And then at the federal level, you've got Donald Trump trying to take back the White House. That's a lot of pressure on you. So let's talk about this. What brought you to this role?
Oh, yeah. I think getting angry did that the most, to be honest with you. Young people this year in North Carolina are pretty angry at the fact that our rights are being stripped away from us by a state legislature that doesn't seem to want to listen to us. And I think that we're going to see a surge of young people come out this year, not just to the polls, but to get involved like they never have before in politics, because we're seeing a time where young people's futures are really being threatened, not only by the state legislature, but also federally. To your point, we have a person, Mark Robinson, running for governor right now who wants to take our state back to the 1960s and has been pretty successful in terms of utilizing his bully pulpit to really go after and attack again people across this state who are just trying to survive right now, to be honest with you.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there. When you say he wants to take us back to the 60s, I can't believe it's that modern. It feels like he wants to go back even like to the 1860s, you know,
Yeah.
Some of the things that he has said, and we will certainly get into that. Now, my understanding is when you came into this role 2 years ago?
Well, a year and some change is what I like to say, yeah.
Yeah. How long has that year and some change felt?
Like years?
Is it?
No, pretty extensive, but it's been, I don't know, I think it's been one of the, I joke with people, the highest of highs and the lowest of lows can happen all in the same hour. And so it really does feel like you pack a lot into the days that you have. But I also know, like, when I came into this, we had a lot to rebuild. And I think that it sort of looked at it like a startup in some ways, that you're trying to like reignite a lot of what used to be there, and the party had not focused a ton on bench building and on pipeline recruitment and on things that when you think about a typical organization and what it really uses to function, right? We did not have a ton of that. And I think a lot of young people across North Carolina, like I joked with folks when I got in this, I did not expect to win it. And it's something that I think a lot of people looked at and went, really? Well, then how are you here? And it's because we ran a really scrappy grassroots campaign. Like, we were hungry. And I joke with people about that, but it was 10 people who were sort of my campaign team at its core, all of them below the age of 30. And they made a website for me that was extremely professional. And I remember the day, a couple days after Christmas, us sitting down at the end of 2022 and being like, okay, we think we're going to do this. We're going to launch this. And Grayson Barnett looking at me and being like, Anderson, you need to say, lock it in, and we're going to go to town. But he was just like, you've got to pull, you got to pull the trigger on this at some point and not be so afraid. Because I think that any young person, when they're about to take on a role or even like take on a challenge like this, it's a fearful thing to do, right? Like,
absolutely. There are people double your age who would never even attempt this, right? And you did it. You had the fortitude to do it. Would you say that your team was as hungry and as angry as you are, perhaps more so? I mean, was there a sense of, because you mentioned the word fear, and I suppose I'm trying to see in terms of motivation, how much did fear play a role in getting you to, go for this position and in terms of motivating your team?
I think like the fearful part was just running in general, right? Like anyone, when you step up, everyone told me not to. And I think that was the sort of crux to all of this, right? Is like, we ran against the governor's endorsement and the AG's endorsement. All 7 members of Congress like had endorsed against us in this. And it wasn't because like, I think they necessarily were like, a young person shouldn't be in this role. I think it was more so like, we just don't know who she is, and we have no sort of knowledge of what that can look like. And at least with what we have now, we know what we're going to get when we go into it. But at least in North Carolina, what I've seen is that young people have always had to prove themselves. They have always had to fight to get to be wherever they are. And I joked about it at one point in time of calling it like a train track, where like young people had laid their bodies down on the lines, and like the party had just come through and railroaded them over every time. And they self-sacrificed, and they would continuously and keep doing that because they know that at the end of the day, we're fighting for something bigger. Like, we're fighting for people on the ground. We're fighting for the folks that need this help right now. And finally, like, my election was the culmination of so many young people that had put their bodies on that train track. And we were finally kind of like, man, there's enough of us that have power in here, that have been here long enough, that have agency, that are going to say, no, she can do it because I did this. And like, I did it at a young age, and I didn't need someone to come in and tell me no. I needed someone to come in and say, here's how I'm going to help you do it. And I think that that is such a powerful thing that we're seeing in our party right now, is sort of that realization. And the idea that the North Carolina Dems were the first party across the country to say, like, the grassroots, we're here to say, we need change in our party when it comes to age. It is time to give the baton over to, it is not a marathon, it is not a sprint. In some ways, it's a relay race. And like, we've got to pass the baton to somebody else versus saying, we're just going to drop the stick. And I feel like that's what our party did the best job of this year, is really bringing us into a different era of the Democratic Party where we're letting young people lead for the first time.
I hope so, because, I mean, like you said, there's a lot of ground to be made here. So we're talking about North Carolina, again, a de facto battleground state. I knew President Biden lost North Carolina by 1 percentage point in 2020. And I was actually just reminded that the last time North Carolina was won by a Democrat was 2008 for President Obama. And I also recall speaking to a Democratic strategist here from North Carolina named Doug Wilson, and he said, listen, at one point, there was a lot of ground game for Democrats in North Carolina, and then it just evaporated after President Obama won his first term. So did you feel like when you stepped into this role, were you like picking up the pieces, or were you even trying to find pieces to put together? Like, what was that like? Once you won, what were you left with?
I mean, I just think we had a lack of infrastructure. I joke about it like it was a cat claw kind of, because I've got a cat. I'm a big fan of them. And so like, the party at one point in time under a governor like Jim Hunt, right, used to have its hand, its claw in every county across the state. And he called it a county key system that he had created. And that's where people would say, Republicans would actually tell you in 2010 when they took over the state, they were like, we did it with your key system, actually. Like, we took what Democrats did, right? Because they ain't got no original ideas of their own, so they just use ours. And so the key system was really having someone in every county that made sure the Democratic message was getting out to those folks. And also that they were in charge of get out the vote. They were in charge of, raising money from that county to give to the party every year, actually. And so sort of a self-sustaining model that, like, after you saw sort of the 2010 era happen, we lost on our own maps, like the party went into a decline. And right after Obama had come through in some ways. And what I would tell people is like, why Barack Obama was able to win a state in 2008 and not in 2012 is because you did not see the type of ground game that you saw in 08 in 2012. And that's just because presidential campaigns don't run it the second time like they do the first. Sure. No campaign does. And I think if you need to factor that in when you're running, because you're also trying to do the job at the same time that you're running for it again, right? Like, it's not as easy as it is to do it the first time in some ways. But I think that, like, we had an investment in infrastructure in North Carolina that was a year ahead of the 2008 Super Tuesday election. And that just stayed on the ground throughout Super Tuesday and into the next year of that election cycle. We didn't have that in 2012. We also didn't have it in 2020 because you had a campaign that came in August of the election year versus what we're seeing now, which is them coming in April. And I'm like, that early investment was important, and the state party knew that. And so when I got in this office in February of 2023, we started really raising money because we were like, we're in a financial hole. We have a lot of opportunity right now to use the youngest state party chair. Like, we're getting a lot of national attention about that. Which, to be honest with you, if we had been smarter coming into this, and actually if I had thought I was going to win it, I would have had a comm strategy based around the fact that I was the youngest state party chair. Not something that we had, something that we desperately did miss in some of the things that we did. North Carolina had the idea of like, I need to figure out how to raise money because everyone told me when I was coming into this, I would not be able to do it. And then also I was like, I want to get out everywhere. Like, people need to see the state party in every single county corner of this state. Anywhere someone will invite me, I will show up, which meant I was on the road every single day of 2023. And we were going out to counties everywhere, events everywhere. Some of the counties we'd be back to twice in 1 week if that was like what it needed to have, like what it needed, you know what I mean? And it was sort of judging that based on the fact that we were doing call time with these county chairs. I had spent the entire month of January on the phones from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day. Like, I would walk into my call time manager's house at the beginning of the day, and I would sit there on the phones with him all day long, and it would just be me being like, he'd say, call one more person, and then it would like give a spirit back in you, and you'd be like, okay, I can do it one more time. But I had called every county party chair, so all of them had my phone number. When I called them back, like when I became state chair, all of them and they answered the phone for the first time. Like they had not picked up the phone.
Funny how that works.
State party beforehand, right? And I was up in Perquimans County. We launched a thing called a rural tour that we're doing now, which is sort of something I've been doing since I have been in this job, right? But it like, I don't know, it all kind of came back to like we were going to brand it. We're actually going to have like 3 talking points we're going to give out in every county now. Like we're going to officialize this shit in some ways, and we did. But when I went out to Pasquotank County, it was the first time I'd been back in that county since forever, right? And Tammy Miller-White is the chair in that county. And she told me, she said, Anderson called me. She gets up in front of a room full of 12 people maybe, because it's a tiny county. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we're all sitting up there. And she goes, you know, and it was Pasquotank. We did Perquimans the next day. And we had Currituck, Dare, and Washington. And she was sitting up there and she said, you know, Anderson, like, I had not really believed anything you told me when you ran for this about the type of resources y'all were going to give us, about the type of like investment the state party was going to put back into rural North Carolina again. And she said, I owe you an apology. She said, because you have. And like, I'll be honest, like I started crying. It was one of those moments where I was sitting up there being like, I don't know if we've done everything that like we had said we could, like we want to, right? We want to achieve it. And it was sort of like you're getting that notion everywhere. And there's that saying, right, like 90% of politics is just showing up. Mm-hmm. And I think that for such a long time, the party just did not do that. And we didn't show up everywhere. And we've taken the approach now of like, if we can run a Democrat in every race in any county that we can find, we want to. And the message is holding Republicans accountable, right? Like it is about giving democracy an actual chance, which means you have somebody on the ballot to fight against what they're giving us right now. And so the party filled 168 out of 170 state house and Senate seats this year. First time we've done that since 2018. And it was through the help of like pulling in the House and the Senate caucuses to be like, where can we fill gaps for y'all? Because we know that they're not going to be your top tier races all the time. Like, how can the party be that sort of place where like it's the treasure chest of whatever can come out of it, right? In some ways. And it's just not, it has not done that the last 6 years.
That sounds like one of the recurring themes is the importance of connectivity between the county party, the state party, and the party at the national level. And you also mentioned that one of the things that President Biden and the Biden campaign seem to have learned from 2012, 2016, 2020 is that we need to get North Carolina early.
Yeah.
So you said that you know, the Biden campaign has made more of a concerted effort here in starting in April. So since you took over, since President Biden has made more of a concerted effort, are you seeing meaningful progress there? Like, what can you describe? Like, obviously, we know that you need to help provide for the county level party. How important is it for the federal, the national party, to help you? Is it like a pipeline from federal to state to county?
I think it builds on itself, right? And I always say, like, you start with the grassroots and you move up. And so the state party's main priority this year was like, we got to rebuild the county parties, and we need to have an operational county party in every single county. And the greatest thing, when we did that rural tour in northeastern North Carolina, Washington County, we had folks there that looked at me and they said, we're from Gum Neck, North Carolina. And I said, where in the hell is Gum Neck, North Carolina from? Because I said, I actually don't know where that is. Mm-hmm. And they said, Terrell County. And I was like, and I was looking at 7 people sitting in front of me. Terrell County's never been organized. It has not been organized for the Democratic Party ever in its life.
Oh, wow. It
has been the one county across the state that we have had the hardest time. And they looked at us and they were like, you tell everybody in North Carolina we're ready to be organized. And I was like, I said, say less, Gum Neck, like say less. And they said, you know, we really want to get you out to an event out here. So I think in June, we're going out to like Terrell County for the first time with the state party. And it's one of those places where like people have genuinely forgotten it even existed on a map unless you were looking at the counties. And I just think like that's the point this year of chasing 74,000 votes that Joe Biden lost by in 2020 is chasing everybody from Gum Neck to Greensboro, to be real with you, about where you're going to turn out and vote and like who can turn out and vote. And for us, it's really like the Project 100 organizing team. So in April, not in April, I guess, but like after February, we had fundraised a good amount by April. And so we were looking at hiring back staff for the state party in 2023. we went on in September and we hired 3 organizers that we put on the ground to really focus on the municipal races in 23. Because to be honest, after 2022, we lost the Supreme Court. We kept ourselves from being in the super minority by 1 vote that then turned out to not be actually real with a party switcher named Trisha Cotham. And then we were also sitting there with just the loss of our lives across the counties. 45 counties in 2022 lost a Democratic representative in them. The other ones did not have one to lose. We flipped 1 county commissioner seat across the entire state that year in Buncombe County, which is where Asheville is, a progressive blue bubble that is coming up in our state, right, in every way. We were kind of expected to win that county commissioner seat, right? But out of 100 counties, we flipped 1 seat and that's it. And it makes you do that right there, right? And so when we came off of that, the energy on the ground, it didn't matter if you told people we came within that percentage of a point, right? It was, we feel like we got our asses handed to us right now and ain't nothing gonna make us feel better about that. And I'm like, municipal races will, because they are what made me feel better about my hometown in Person County in 2021. When we flipped the Roxborough City Council, I sat there and it gave me a wind like none other underneath my sails to say, man, we can fucking do this shit again. We just got to get out there and get Democrats active and on the ground. And so we did. And in 2023, we had those 3 organizers go out there. We ran 1,100 candidates for 1,600 races across the state. We're not able to contest all of them. 2025 is going to look a hell of a lot different for that, in my opinion, as well. But in 2023, we were able to win places that Democrats had not won before, right? Like looking at 2022, where Ricky Hurtado lost his seat in the state legislature by 500 votes or less, a state legislative race that Sherry Beasley, who ran for United States Senate that year, right? She won that seat. We lost that seat by 500 votes. So when people talk about coattail effects, I'd love to hear them go tell the 5 House races that the state party lost in 2022, and even though we had somebody running at the top of the ticket who won those 5 House seats, we did not. And so for me, it is about how many people do you have boots on the ground talking about those lower level races as well to ensure that you have power at the top of the ticket. Because anybody that's coming out to vote for a state ledge race, they're not skipping president.
Right.
It is the opposite, though. People that come out to vote for the president will skip the state legislature if they do not know who those people are. And so we got to make sure people know. That's what those municipal races did. They provided energy and they gave us local wins that we needed again, because everybody looked at me and they were like, why do you talk so much about this shit? Why on earth do municipal races matter? Why on earth should the party get involved with them? And I'm just like, because our people on the ground pay attention to who's in their city council and their county commission, and they know their local offices have been run by Republicans who don't care about them for the longest period of time. And the party showing up in these races and caring about who's affecting you locally is going to really help you nationally too. And that's also what helped us be able to fill those state house and senate races in 2023.
That's fascinating because it does defy the conventional wisdom. Like if you crack open a political science book, they'll say, it's really about the top of the ticket and you hope it trickles down. But actually, you made a pretty compelling case that there's a huge buildup effect, at least as much, if not more so.
It's a groundswell.
So let me ask you this. So we're talking at the broader level on the state. And again, I mentioned this sooner, but this is something which is so infuriating. Until recently, I mentioned that there are more registered Democrats and Republicans in North Carolina, and even the congressional split was proof this is a purple state. Republicans, as we said, they won 2 Supreme Court decisions. They made a case before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court allowed heavily gerrymandered voting maps. And my understanding is, I think they are favored to win 11 out of the 14 congressional seats, taking us from a 7 to 7 to an 11 to a 3. But what it shows is what Republicans are prepared to do, what Republican politicians, between this and Trish Cotham and everything else, if they get an inch of power, they take a mile for it. And they punish Democrats. They avoid everything in their power, it seems to avoid competing on even footing. Would you agree with that characterization?
I would say that Republicans, when they got control, right, even before they had it in North Carolina, and I referenced 2010 so much, right, because that's when Republicans won on democratically gerrymandered maps, to be honest with you. And when Democrats had control of the state of North Carolina for 40 years, and when Republicans took back control in 2010, they had mapped every lever of power that you could pull in this state. And I say that to the point right now, when you look at the powers that they have stripped from the governor's office, right? And something I like to tell people, I'm like, fun fact about North Carolina, right? We have 3 branches of government. That's not the fun fact, but the fun fact is our executive branch is the Council of State. The Council of State are 10 elected offices that are elected statewide. We are one of 11 states in the country that have a Council of State, though. And the state legislature in 2018 sat there and Republicans were like, God, how do we make Cooper weaker? Like, we're just looking for something fun to do, right? We just want to strip him even more of some power. We're going to take his power to declare a state of emergency, and we're going to give the money power to that to the Council of State. And we're going to see how much he can do with a 6-4 minority for Democrats on the Council of State, how many state of emergencies he can call and actually utilize the power of it if he doesn't have it. So when we go into a pandemic and he calls over a state of emergency with the pandemic and a mask mandate, there's only the mandate that he can give. There is no money behind the mandate, right? And it's like, damn, they even sat there and were thinking about that, right? Races like your Commissioner of Agriculture, Commissioner of Insurance, Commissioner of Labor, that no one thinks are relevant or important or even know what they do on a ballot right now, right? And it's saying like these positions became even more important to them because they are a lever in this. And so looking at the Council of State from the judicial, right? And I'm like, 3 branches of government in North Carolina. If you're a real constitutional Republican right now, I have got an executive that is the weakest one in the entire country based on our state constitution. You have a judiciary that bows at the knee to my legislative branch because they're the ones that control my judiciary right now. There is a thing called a Judicial Standards Commission in North Carolina that is appointed by the state legislature now because the state legislature took that power away from the governor as well to appoint folks to that commission. That commission is single-handedly in charge with taking judges off the bench in the state of North Carolina. Justice Anita Earls, who's the one out of 2 Democrats, right, that still sit on my North Carolina State Supreme Court right now, has been taken through the Judicial Standards Commission ad nauseum this year, trying to get that woman removed from the bench. And they are attacking her with it every time. So to your point, do I believe that Republicans are taking and playing at power? Yes. And I believe that they have no respect for it and honestly no balance of it whatsoever across the state. Like if you genuinely wanted to see a government that had a bipartisanship to it, you're not looking at what's going on in North Carolina right now and saying that's fair or it's actually in practice of what the Constitution was set out to operate under, in my personal opinion. But Republicans have taken every advantage to it. And the only thing that I know now to do as Democrats is say, well, baby, I got to pull every lever back. And I got to be doing that. And so for us this year, we have the most qualified candidates that are running up and down the ballot, especially for Council of State. Dr. Sarah Tabor, who's running for Commissioner of Agriculture this year. She's a crop scientist that's helped raise over $4 billion for her clients. Braxton Winston, who's a union member and is running for our Commissioner of Labor this year, talking about the right for workers to make sure that they have safe conditions, but also if they're getting paid more than $7.25 an hour right now, which is still federal minimum wage, but also North Carolina's minimum wage. And then looking at like Natasha Marcus, who's running for our Commissioner of Insurance race, that's saying, rate hike Mike Causey, that's given you 18 insurance rates over the last 20 years since he's been in that role, isn't really effective for people in North Carolina right now. Like, why is Duke Energy allowed to charge you more or why are any sort of homeowners insurance is allowed to charge you more, right, for what you're experiencing right now or what your home is worth right now when the cost of living has only increased and it's not actually the property value of your home that has, right? So it's interesting, and I feel like these are actual issues that not a lot of people see to talk about, but like we've got 10 folks that are very well educated in their different fields, and then you've got Republicans that have nominated the craziest and most extreme slate for the Republican Party that have no experience in any of these sort of individual professions. Like you have a Mark Robinson, right, who's running for governor, who has never held another public office besides lieutenant governor, and doesn't even show up apparently to that office to take that job as it is, seriously enough. And who's also said that he would rather see a total abortion ban in the state of North Carolina, that he believes that teachers are demons and that we are teaching CRT in every single one of our classrooms right now, and sort of making this like agenda against people in general in North Carolina, right? And I tell people like the comparison that I give between a Josh Stein and a Mark Robinson right now is like Mark Robinson is a politician. Like he is someone that's going to get up there and spin you all day long on the talking points and everything else. And I'm like a Josh Stein though is a public servant. He is someone that has only ever tried to do good things for the people in North Carolina, and that includes going after big pharma. It includes going after companies like Juul who have poisoned kids in our state right now. Although don't tell kids that because a lot of kids really still like their nicotine. We got to wane them off of it. But like tell parents that one and that talking point in that sense. But like I feel like we have someone who's got a real record of accomplishment. And so for the folks in the state, like, I think a resume still matters for people. I don't think North Carolina voters just go based off of who has an RRD beside their name as much as people would like to think that they do.
I hope that's the case. I mean, there's certainly signs in the past that that's been true. Mark Robinson, I mean, we do need to talk about him for a minute because, as far as, he might not have the name recognition in terms of some of the Republicans' absolute craziest in terms of their pantheon. Like you hear of Carrie Lake, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
He's just as bad.
Yes.
Actually worse, but like,
So I'm curious, like if somebody watching who is, they hear this and they say, okay, well, it sounds like Republicans have worked in overtime to strip the governor of crucial powers. It's effectively a figurehead, and so you can make the argument. What's the danger of Mark Robinson becoming governor? I think there's a lot of danger, but if you could articulate, what would it mean if Mark Robinson wins the election?
It's hard for me to even say what he has said and make it be like salient for people, right? To like understand, no, this man is full of just like, he hates people and he sounds really great when he's talking about it, but it's like, no, the words that he's saying are actually so hateful. And it's not someone, like, you don't want someone that is representing every person in this state to hate half of them. And like, that's something to me right now that we're experiencing. Mark Robinson, though, it's a website that the state party has created called realmarkrobinson.com, because I think that people actually need to hear it for themselves, for them to believe it. And so it's every single thing that he has ever said about any issue or any like sort of demographic that you could care about, in particular women. Because to me, this election cycle, not only from Mark Robinson, but also Donald Trump, like it is about what type of world we want to live in. And especially me as a young woman, like there was at one point in time where you could not say, grab someone and it be considered okay. And I think that it's now mainstream to talk about women in this way of like, we at one point in time were authoring the Violence Against Women Act to make sure that we were protecting women. And right now I feel like women have been more threatened, and people in general, right, marginalized communities in general feel more threatened in this country than they did 4 years ago, right? Or 8 years ago when we actually had still a Democratic president in charge. And when you had Donald Trump come into office, it became this very like hostile environment for, I think, young people, young women to come into politics even. And I say that all the time because I'm like, I don't feel like people fully understand how it feels to sit in a job like this and feel fearful to like be in it, And I get it from my social media all the time. I get it from everyday folks. Like it's this constant thing of like, are you safe? Are you okay? Because people know how crazy politics has gotten and how like threatening to someone's life it's gotten. And I hate that because I'm like, to the point that I think other people would make, like, you used to be able to disagree without being disagreeable, and there used to be something in politics where there was a semblance of like, it is not to the point where I might punch you or I might get physical with you over how like you feel about something or how we come to terms on it. But I don't think that's the case anymore. And I think Mark Robinson, to your point, it is the weakest executive office, but it is the most powerful in the terms of the bully pulpit. And like, that's what he would have, a greater one. And one that would say, if we do, and I fully expect us to break the supermajority on these maps right now, a Mark Robinson that's got a full supermajority in both the state legislature or the state house and the state senate would say, we want a total abortion ban in North Carolina tomorrow. And I mean, I don't know of any other good policies that he would create in terms of that. It's not said like, if we get a supermajority, we're going to make sure everybody has a job in the state of North Carolina tomorrow. It's not if I get elected governor, I'm the supermajority, I'm going to make sure everybody across North Carolina has health care tomorrow. Like it is, I'm going to make sure that abortion gets banned if we're in the supermajority and I am governor tomorrow. And like, I don't know about everybody else in the state, but it's sort of like, does that give you an image of what the future of North Carolina could look like? Whereas you're looking at an era of governors, of Democratic governors that are like Jim Hunt and Terry Sanford that sat down and said, if I'm governor and I've got a supermajority tomorrow, we're going to create Smart Start, which is going to allow for every child in the state of North Carolina to have a preschool education, and it's going to be free and it's going to be fair for everybody. We are going to make sure that there is a system of higher education that exists for every child to get a great way or a great university level education in the state of North Carolina. Like they sat down and like when they were dreaming and creating and visioning of what the state would look like, it was much more about people's everyday success than it was about preventing people from succeeding. So
No, I think you've illuminated the threat there too, because he would have a Supreme Court in his pocket, state Supreme Court in his pocket, potentially a conservative Republican supermajority in the legislature, and then of course the bully pulpit of the governor's mansion. And it is terrifying because we see it really at the federal level too. Like you said, Donald Trump came along, and it's not just Trump. What the impact that he has had, the permissive structure that he's created for Republican politicians across this country to be as profoundly cruel and divisive as possible, and the total lack of an affirmative agenda. So you talk about the contrast. You know, I say this as, again, somebody who spent most of his life in Kentucky, seeing Governor Beshear, you know, try to create an affirmative agenda for everyone, not just those who voted for him, but for everyone.
Amen.
And Mark Robinson is the exact contrast of that, where it's about, he doesn't want an affirmative agenda for everyone. He wants to specifically target women, marginalized groups, and others, and punish them. Mm-hmm. And yeah, the things that he said, I mean, you should go check that website out, because I've heard like things that he said. I've not gone through the entire catalog, but they sound like a cartoon villain.
And that's the thing is, like, anyone running the government right now is a lizard person. Like, that is something that he has said. I feel like I should be on SNL, and I should just be like reading out like, oh, like this is what they, you know, sort of like that. But I mean, Mark Robinson's also somebody who has come out to be very pro-Jewish recently, and has come out to be very like, I am here, I stand with Israel, I'm to support Israel. And I'm like, well, you have also been someone that's denied the Holocaust. Like, you are also someone that has said that did not happen, that people that were like Hitler was a good person, that Nazis were okay people.
That you should read Hitler.
That you should read Hitler, right? And so I'm like, so there's a different dichotomy, right, than what you have said. And I always think of it back to what my mom would say of like, show me your company and I'll tell you who you are, right, in that sense. And I think Mark Robinson, the people he keeps around him are also folks that are Holocaust deniers, folks that are abortion banners, folks that would say we don't need public schools to actually exist in North Carolina. We'd like to see people stay poor and stay dumb in the state of North Carolina. And like, that is who he is down to his core.
Well, and then transitioning obviously to the macro level at its peak, which is the federal politics. Would it be fair to say Mark Robinson would be a proxy for Donald Trump and for MAGA in North Carolina?
And I mean, I'll be honest with you, there are people that have heard him say, like, you know, it's the governor's office first, it's the presidency next. Like, you would not see Mark Robinson run for president if he was to ever become governor of North Carolina. And I hope that is as threatening as I need to get to everyone watching out there nationally, for like, it doesn't stop here. And I don't know why we would want to cede ground anywhere to someone that stands for things that he does. Like, you think about a Herschel Walker-esque type person and make it 10 times worse, and you might have gotten to Mark Robinson. And I really do believe that people this year are going to be able to see that. We're going to label it more than we ever have. But we've also, I mean, the thing that I like to remind people of is, I'm like, he is still lieutenant governor right now. And the reason why he got there is because not enough people in North Carolina knew what he said and knew the type of things that he stood for when he ran. Because lieutenant governor is also a race that people sort of look at and are like, well, what do you do?
Right.
And like, why should we pay attention to it?
Yeah, it is. The momentum in that way seems to be getting considerably worse. I'm hoping that as we get closer to the election, Mark Robinson's maliciousness will become more evident. And I think it's important. I mean, well, I guess one of the things that I'm hearing from you a lot, which resonates with me, is, and I use this word very carefully because people take metaphors and run with it, fight. That there's a fight that you're bringing. Not that you're going to be uncivil, but that you are going to engage in an aggressive ground game in this state. And that the Democratic Party, because I'll be honest with you, this is something on my channel that I talk about quite a bit. I feel that too often Democrats are held to wildly different standards in terms of civility. MAGA
even our own party too.
Yeah.
Like, that's the crazy thing about it. It's even our own people are like, we're getting too mean out here. And I'm like, baby, we got to come out swinging.
100%. And I mean, I'm not saying swing indiscriminately.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's the difference between, I suppose, direct versus cruel. MAGA is cruel. They swing indiscriminately, wildly. But I love the fact that you're bringing the energy. Like, listen, yes, we want to bring an affirmative message to Attorney General Stein as he runs for the governorship. We want to show what his policies would be, the fact that he has an affirmative agenda for all North Carolinians. However, Mark Robinson sucks, and we're also going to tell that part of it too. And I think that dual-pronged approach is necessary in today's politics, because whether we like it or not, people are motivated in part by fear and by anger. whether we like it or not. And I think it's important. Like, listen, if you're going to be afraid and angry, you should be afraid and angry at the right things.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to fear and be angry about in terms of the Republican brand that's represented here in North Carolina by Mark Robinson and at the national level by Donald Trump.
I think it's important to do it this year because of who's running, to be honest with you. I think like you have to make people in some ways fearful of a Mark Robinson because they don't, like, they're not going to understand it until it happens to them, right? Like that's
right.
Yeah, and like that's the piece of it is like I need to tell people, I need to get people feel like fearful of a North Carolina under this man, but I also think like we're not going to have to do that but for so long. And I think that like when Democrats get the majority again, and like we didn't have to convince people for those 40 years to get out and vote for Democrats, to be honest with you. They saw what Democrats were doing for them, and people came out and voted for a Jim Hunt and a Terry Sanford and a Bev Perdue and a Kay Hagan and every other, I mean like a Roy Cooper, right? Like every other, a Josh Stein, every other strong Democrat that we've had in this state that is like presented the idea forward for North Carolina for them. But I also think us being in a super minority for so long has not allowed for any of that, like any of that vision to like leave itself or let itself come through. And I think that's really where like I'm having to do both and this year because I can't just show people like this is what Democrats can do. And it's also because like the education effort of like North Carolina is probably the only state you can go into right now and you can pull a person off the street and be like, you know what gerrymandering is? And they'd be like, abso-fucking-lutely I do. I'm sitting in it right now. But like it's I mean, it is a big education effort that we still have to do as well of like, do you know why Democrats have not been able, like why like, do you know why shit's not gotten better? Like, do you actually understand that? And to your point, like, do you have somebody to blame? And do you know the right person? And then do you know you have agency to go get that person out of office and do something about it? And like, I think especially with young people right now in the state, like young people feel very apathetic and disengaged because they don't know the power they have. They don't understand it. And they're like, I can do nothing. And I'm like, that is what they want you to think. Like,
absolutely.
Republicans get so much power when you sit back and you say, I'm not going to be involved with this process anymore. And if that's what you want, then you're giving them everything that they need right now. But the young people that I meet are like, no, tell me how and tell me where to go, and I will do all three. And I'm like, okay.
I'm excited for that because, the Republican Party entrenches its power through minoritarian rule. They don't try to win over hearts and minds. They try to depress voter turnout, suppress voter turnout, because they have a very motivated base. And if we can just get other people to not vote, then that's all we need to win.
Well, it's the thing of like Democrats have got to fall in love, Republicans are fall in line. I mean, like, I think that is the best way to frame it. But Democrats this year in North Carolina too, the one thing I think we're doing a lot differently is we're running as a team this year. Like everybody up and down the ballot is saying each other's names when they're going out places. Like the party this year has made a very coordinated effort to try to, like, the Council of State, right? They look, the like pictures on our mailers look the same because we all had them come in and do like group photo shots this year and stuff. And like, it's more coordinated than we've ever had it in terms of just like the way that in which people feel their campaigns are. And I think like we don't look at it this year. We should not look at it this year in North Carolina like we've got two people at the top of the ticket, like just Joe Biden and just Josh Stein. I'm like, no, I've got 15 statewide candidates this year actually. And every single one of them represent an issue or represent some faction of like the electorate that we need to get out and vote this year. And we've just got to put the right surrogates in front of the right people and help them say, but you're voting slate. Like, that's what you're doing.
Well, then I suppose I'll ask this, because then at the federal level, we do have President Biden, an incumbent president who has various political challenges despite, and again, this is something which frustrates me immensely, a very robust record of success. And so to your question, like, you know, at the state level, you can't pitch a Democratic success story in terms of like a really robust record because they've been stymied by Republicans. When you're also campaigning on behalf of the president, one of the things I struggle with is, okay, how much do we talk about what Biden has done because I feel it's wildly underreported versus how much Biden wants to do in the next term? I feel like they're both important. Personally, my gut instinct is if you want me to come out and vote for you again, yes, I want to know what you're going to do with my vote this time, but I also want to know what you did with my vote before. Otherwise, why should I turn out?
Yeah.
Can you like weigh in on that at all? I'd love to know like what your instincts are in terms of trying to make the case for Democrats at the federal level.
It would really depend on like the audience that I'm talking to as well. I think for young people this year, it is a huge aspect around like we've got to protect abortion rights where we still have them, and we've got to fight for more like where we've lost them. And I think that it is a huge motivating thing, especially for young women on college campuses right now, young men on college campuses right now too. And the other sort of side to that I look at is like that is at the national level, that's also at the state level too, right? So it's sort of a two-pronged battle that we're fighting in that way, which is helpful to us right now. And I also think that the way, and especially for rural North Carolina right now, people, to your point, just don't know. Like a lot of these county commissioners and city councils, like local journalism does not exist in these communities anymore. No one's writing about the fact that their county just got $3 million. And like the county commissioners that are Republicans are not going around yelling at like, hey, did y'all know that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris just gave us $3 million out here? Damn, that's nice. Like,
thank you, Mr. President,
no,
for the bipartisan infrastructure law.
For this.
Yeah.
That like Tom Tillis and Richard Burr voted for, might I add, right? Because even my Senate Republicans knew like, hey, North Carolina's infrastructure could use some money right now, and like we've got shit we need to fix too, especially in these rural counties where you have runoff from CAFO's farms that have been polluting waterways, and so making sure that you do have pipes that don't have lead in them for clean water in cities and counties throughout the east, and like in the west it was to go forward or towards like broadband expansion, right, for some of these counties. In the Piedmont they did whatever with it. Like I mean it genuinely went towards like and the Henderson County Dems did such a good job. Like they did this video where they took people around to visit every American Rescue Plan Act like site that got money from that, and like one of them was a playground that's a multi-use playground for kids with disabilities, and it's actually made Henderson County like a tourist attraction for counties surrounding it because of kids with wheelchairs, and there's not a playground anywhere near in that like geographic radius that has a playground that's got wheelchair accessibility to it besides the one in Henderson County because of American Rescue Plan dollars that they spent this year on that. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, that's the storytelling, and if we can do that everywhere across the state this year, I'm like, you give me 6 months and that is a good time frame to go around and tell these little nuggets, and I'm gonna travel all over North Carolina to be able to do it. And I think the more that the party can show up and say that and tell that, and the more that Donald Trump does not have an office here, does not have a field organizer, does not have a staffing presence whatsoever, is only going to help us more in that sense. Because the one thing that I give Republicans a lot of credit for in North Carolina in the last 2 election cycles is that they stole the Democrats' playbook. Like, they had a ground game. They had regional organizing directors here in 2022. And I sat there and I said, Republicans are investing in field. Republicans are investing in field. Oh my God. Like, that's monumental in my opinion for what they were willing to do and what they saw like as the way to win elections. And I think that Democrats have got to get back to our old playbooks again. Like, we are not so far past where we once have come from in so many ways. And like, I think Kentucky would understand that too, of just like retail politics still matters so much, even in more urban areas too, of like, do you know who represents you locally? Yeah. And if you can answer that question first, like you're a lot more likely to get out and vote. But most people could not tell you who their city council or their county commissioner is. And that's also a big problem that I have in general, is just like, you're supposed to know who represents you in government. Government's supposed to want you to know them as well. And most of the people do not right now.
Well, it sounds like the ground game is obviously on fire right now in the best possible way. It sounds like you're getting more support from the national level from President Biden and the Democrats. And it sounds like with respect to stories, you have a hell of a story to tell. So where can people, if they want to contribute, where can people go?
Anyone can go to the North Carolina Dems website. It's ncdp.org and get involved. We are launching canvases every single weekend, phone banks every single week. So we've got different options for everybody depending on what your sort of talent or time allots to you for. And I like to tell people, if you are not a phone banker, if you're not a door knocker, at least yet, until I can make you one, what is something else that you were good at doing that like you would like to give your time or your talents to? There's a job in this party for everybody. I just need to know what yours is. And they can also go there and donate to our Project 100 team that we're really excited is out there every weekend knocking doors. I think we were, at least from what I've been told by everybody, we are one of the first state parties that were out there on the doors this year. So we've been knocking since March, and we had at least 1,100 doors knocked from the state party just last weekend alone. Wow. And then our county parties are also knocking doors individual from that too. So it's really exciting.
Well, Anderson Clayton, I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Seriously.